I've got the craziest story that I have seen in politics in years, I think. The story has so many levels of disinformation to it, I don't really know where to begin. The story is the allegation of BIOLABS in Ukraine, US-funded biological laboratories in Ukraine. The Russian government has made an accusation that the US is developing bioweapons, and part of the reason that they invaded Ukraine was to stop this development of bioweapons in Ukraine. Here is the Russian government official line.
We have found your biological material. It was developed primarily for military purposes. As it turns out, it was all happening in Ukraine. What were you doing there? It's a different continent. It has no borders with you. There are no bases of yours. What were they doing there under the guise of scientific research?
So we've got it. We've found that the Americans and the Ukrainians are working together to build these biological weapons. Is this claim credible or not? The Russians do know a thing or two about chemical and biological weapons. The Russians regularly use at least chemical weapons against their own people, against political dissidents. They did it to the main opposition leader. They've done it to a number of people who've fallen afoul of Putin's regime. Furthermore, for most of the history of the Cold War, the Soviets accused the United States of developing biological weapons, usually without any basis. There's actually a letter that was sent from the Soviet Central Committee in 1953, just after the death of Stalin, to the communist dictator Mao Zedong. They said, for Mao Zedong, the Soviet government and Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union were misled. The spread in the press of information about the use of by the Americans of bacteriological weapons in Korea was based on false information. The accusations against the Americans were fictitious. So we know from the Russians themselves that they have a very long history of making false accusations about the Americans and bioweapons. But what about these labs? What about this accusation? The Ukrainians came out and immediately denied that any of this was happening. In the Kiev Post, they wrote, recently fake news about the alleged activities of American military biological laboratories in Ukraine has been spread in the media and social networks. No foreign biological laboratories operate in Ukraine. Statements recently made by individual politicians are not true and are a deliberate distortion of the facts. Okay, no foreign biological laboratories exist in Ukraine. This is BS, fake news, Russian propaganda. So says Ukraine. The Americans are saying this too. So you've got the official propagandists of the liberal regime here in America, PolitiFact, Snopes, the fact checkers, big tech, the mainstream media. They are saying this is totally fake news. There are no, right here at the subheadline, there are no US-run biolabs in Ukraine, contrary to social media posts. And yet, just a couple days ago, we played this on the show yesterday, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, admitted that there are, in fact, biolabs in Ukraine.
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
There are biological, and you could tell she didn't want to fully admit all of this, and then Rubio diverted the questioning after that. But she said pretty clearly, there are biolabs in Ukraine. The relationship of the U.S. to those biolabs she doesn't quite get into, and she says we're very concerned that those biolabs might fall into the hands of the Russians as they invade Ukraine. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, through a little video that was linked actually from one of these fact-checker websites, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev admitted that the U.S. has a pretty tight connection with these laboratories.
The work we do in the biological threat reduction program is complicated. And it's difficult to communicate it sometimes to outside audiences. And I think our adversaries like Russia can take advantage of that with some of the propaganda that they put out.
The Biological Threat Reduction Program is working in 27 countries. We feel this disinformation and misinformation is done just to really exploit divisions.
We've had accusations that some research projects were being used to create threats, not to identify threats and reduce them. Ulterior motives are being injected where none exist.
We've built these capabilities for the partners. They're central reference labs for research. They publish everything they do. They invite the international community into their laboratories. They're working on behalf and the benefit of the people of their respective countries.
So these labs, look, they're just purely scientific research to prevent threats, and then the Russian disinformation, they've gone out and they've said this is some kind of military operation to create biological weapons, and that's just completely ridiculous. Okay, this is where it gets really, really weird, because at the end of that video from the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, the presenter says, for more information, go to dtra.mil.military. So you've been telling me the whole time this is just purely a scientific, public health-minded endeavor, and yet now you're directing me to a military website because this program is being run by the Pentagon. It's being run by the Department of Defense. Okay, this is where it gets weird. Yesterday I said, okay, I'm going to look into this. I go to the dtra.mil website. The website was down. I looked on archive.org, which will show you various screenshots of websites when they were online, what the pages looked like, and when they go offline. The page had been up just a couple days prior. I asked other people, I said, go to this website, what do you see? I tried on multiple devices. The website was down. You can use different VPNs to have you coming through different ports of entry to look at the website. The website was down just one day after Victoria Nuland gave her testimony about this. Then a few hours later, it goes back up. Then you go over, I said, okay, I want more information about this program, because the argument that is being made now by the Pentagon is this all dates back to a 2005 treaty that was signed under George W. Bush to dismantle old Soviet bioweapons laboratories. The Soviets had developed these bioweapons after the fall of the Soviet Union. About 14 years later, we go in there into Ukraine, into Georgia, into all these other Eastern Bloc countries, and we're going to very safely protect and dismantle these bioweapons programs. So then I went over to the State Department website where I could find links on the internet to the funding grants, but all the links had been deleted. You couldn't get it there. You had to go to old versions of the details of these grants. And so you look, I mean, there were about 11 or 12 of these on the internet. You've got them for the Kharkiv Oblast Laboratory Center in Kharkiv. You've got the Lviv Oblast Laboratory Center, Lviv. You've got I'm mispronouncing all of these names, the State Regional Diagnostic Veterinary Laboratory. And all of the funding is coming not from the National Institutes of Health, not from the CDC, not from the World Health Organization, not from USAID. It's coming from donor, the Department of Defense of the United States of America. Donor, the Department of Defense of the United States of America. Donor, the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency. On and on and on. So what exactly is going on with these labs? Who is telling the truth? And if no one's telling the truth, what is the truth about these laboratories? I'm so glad you liked that clip. Ring the bell, please. Ring that bell, subscribe, and then head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Subscribe to The Michael Knowles Show. Maybe leave a 5-star review. We'll see you next time.